Thank you for that great introduction, Andrea. And thank you to Lingo Systems for the invitation for us to be able to present today. What we want to discuss today, and we'll both take you through our journey, right? We're going to more or less discuss first how Lingo 24 came into MT, and then all the way through to what we're doing today, right? For that, I would like to start with a quick intro of who we are. I know Andrea did a quick intro before, but I just wanted to tell you, we are localization solutions architects. That is basically speaking about coming from an IT background with a mixture into localization engineering, and now with a very much consultative approach into localization processes with customers. And that ties into being able to use the best possible solutions for customers within their localization needs, right? So if we go to the agenda, Juan, just a second, so we can tell, yeah, so what are we going to be discussing today? We're going to be looking at what we use, how we use MT as a productivity tool, what we believe it is within our structure, what that structure is. And then Juan will take you through the journey of how we built that structure and where we are today. We're going to discuss some important learnings through the process, and then some of our recommendations if you want to follow that track, depending on your size of LSP, depending on budget and everything around that. And then we're going to have a round of questions, if that's okay. So Juan, if you could move to the journey, right? The MT as a productivity tool. So when we think of MT within before Lingo 24 and now Unbabel, right, as we recently acquired, we're looking at MT as productivity, and Elena just before was speaking about their productivity tests, and of course we've done ours in-house for a few years already. So you're going to see that in the journey by Juan. But this what you have in front is the ideal scenario that we're looking at of using MT for the majority. Of course, there are exceptions, but for the majority of the customers, right, you would have the content coming in, and we're talking about document-based localization. So the content coming in being pre-translated by MT, and then having some type of post-editing with an optional customer review, which we have discussions with customer at the moment of their decision, right? Those two, together with the translation memory being created and the terminology that is actually, we try for it to be customer maintained, then feed and retrain the engine actually live. One will speak about it a bit more in detail. And that feeds a nice process ongoing with customers that we have. To give you more or less the structure that we work on. So we have our own engines, and we have our own internal CAD tool. That's a bit different than integrating, but Juan will show you what I mean with that. So we've built our own engines, and we use our own CAD tool to be able to handle the content coming in. And our translators work directly on our online CAD tool. So we do not kind of share content around or things like that. Everything happens in our CAD tool, and everything is tied up into our MT. So Juan, if you want to add something here, if you want to go to your next.
Yeah, so it's important that we have our own CAD tool because we have built the CAD tool around all this, right? So our translators will have the right access to terminologies and translation memories and fuzzies and everything on top of the MT coming from the MT engines. Also, this that you see here is our default position, but we obviously have lighter, as was mentioned before, post-editing with a single post-editor and no review. We may use raw MT in the right circumstances, although that's not something we do so often. And we do use full human translation. And finally, we use MT for things like TM alignment, creating terminologies, transliteration. So we kind of have gone far in our journey. And then let me take you to the actual timelines of the journey, right? So Lingo 24 was founded in 2001 as a startup in Aberdeen, and with the kind of .com bubble at the time. I then launched it in the 2000s in Romania, Panama, and Philippines to kind of offer a 24/7 service. And we are headquartered in Edinburgh, which has a very strong MT kind of research group in the university, and that can help also understand some of our decisions. On the matter we are interested, which is our MT journey, and I will go into more detail in the next slides. But in 2012, we set up our first MT team. That was only three very bright people. They were coming from the Dublin University as a, working the same research group, and they started all this journey of statistical engines in 2012, and then introducing adaptive later on, and then moving on to neural in 2018. And now we are part of Unbabel, which is obviously very exciting for us with all the MT capabilities they bring, which is super, super exciting. Now, our first approach, which is 2012, was mostly vertical engines, so engines tuned to the subject matter and then customized per client. It's very natural for us to customize per client because we have a lot of data, right? So we are not talking about new clients that come with projects. We are typically talking about clients that have worked with us for years or for months and many other projects. So we already have a lot of data to try customize your engines. So that's also a very natural thing for us to do. Now, that first 2012, 13, 14, 15, we were good, but I don't think we can say we are successful like at all. So we did a lot of pilots. We had a lot of rejection from translators and clients because I don't think at the time anyone was prepared for this MT journey. So we ended up, after a lot of work internally and overfitting, overly optimistic scores, and everything you can think of, we ended up with a kind of a stable solution in terms of MT, limited to technical content, French, Italian, German, Spanish, Portuguese, so just a few languages, and a lot of resistance from translators and clients. Now, that was the first step, but then things started to get a bit better. So, and this is 2016. We introduced adaptive engines, adaptive statistical engines, which was quite a lot of work. For those who don't know, adaptive means that it learns while you translate. So literally every translation kind of retrains the engine in memory. So this is one of the quotes that we like, which was for not translators. We didn't tell that we had that when we enabled it. So it literally made a big change in terms of how translators work with MT. This is adaptive, right? So, and then we all know neural, right? So that brought a new concept or a new set of abilities in terms of machine translation. These are blue scores, which were mentioned before. We use something else these days, but I wouldn't have the scores for the whole journey. So just take it with a pinch of salt. But you can see how in 2016, our custom engines were ahead of your generic Google engine. And then when Google introduced neural, they kind of caught up with us. So in terms of the quality, again, this is blue scores, but these are things that we see also in productivity. So these numbers can be backed by productivity increase in terms of our translation work. And then when we introduced a neural MT, we started going away again. So justifying this custom MT journey. We don't use it for everything, but this kind of created a big impact in terms of adoption. So just joining the dots with the previous slide, you can see how we didn't kind of use it for more than 10-20% of the content up until we fully introduce neural engines, right? We still only use it for the right language combinations, for the right content types. For those, we have seen, as I think Elena mentioned before, that the productivity literally doubles. For others, it kind of just improves. And for yet others, it doesn't even improve, right? So what we do, and that our team does very often, is kind of piloting that and making sure that that's going to happen, right? So and making sure that you control the quality levels for different projects, so we don't lose. Like we actually get we win by it. This is the percentage of revenue. So percentage of customers will be lower. It's just big customers with a lot of technical content that actually make this number probably a bit higher than it would be in terms of customers. And I think that's pretty much it. I'll pass it to Stevan to talk you through our lessons learned.
Yeah, so it's important what Juan was saying and what we were saying at the beginning, because as we had, and this is, I think, the takeaway, right? As we had everything built in-house, you can very much assume that we stumbled, and we stumbled a lot. The easiness of having everything in-house is that as we stumbled, we also learned from it, and it was easier to apply that learning than having to externally go and change and integrate and set up. So that's kind of what we want to bring today, part of what we learned. So of course we learned that if you add MT to this a proper workflow, you will be better at speed and cost of it, because you can definitely translate more faster. And I'm going to show you actually running a case study of a customer that we work with in exactly that way, right? Of course, with adaptive came a big shift. With the fact that we had adaptive engines, the engine was learning on the fly, which means it learned from translator changes on the go. So somebody coming afterwards, feedback from the customer, or even a second reviewer, if needed, depending on the process, would already be served with what the initial translator, with the changes that initial translator made. That's also important in parallel projects where you have different content being done at the same time, but they all feed from the same engine being trained at the same time. Quality levels started to become much higher than expected once we started applying neural and adaptive. On top of that, the strategy behind it was for translators to feed into that engine with full knowledge that they're actually helping our customers, right? Now, to some of the difficult bits or some of the challenges, well, and there was a question before from Mark, like how do you decide which process to use, right? This is what we've been saying all the time. MT is an advanced tool, and whatever customers come in and say, well, I want MT, well, there's a question about how, and a lot of the initial presentations also echoed this. How is your content created? Will it actually benefit from MT properly? Are you using it in the right places? What's your real budget? What's your output going to be? What do you expect from this content? This is something that we have kind of gotten very comfortable in being very consultative with our customers on what they want to do first, rather than just being a cost per profit approach. So it is important to understand that MT is a tool, and it's a very important tool as an LSP, but it's also a very important tool as a customer, depending on their need. We also found out that it can be detrimental. When used in the wrong place, it will actually make translators work harder. It will actually make them need to research more, or it can veer them away from the translation that should be there. So that's something to take into account, hence the push for customized over generic as much as you can. Now to the ugly bits of it, the difficult bits is, we've been doing this for some years now, as you saw in the journey. So something that we found throughout those years is that customers used to be worried about MT, and it'd be very difficult to get them on to understanding that with a proper strategy and flow, you could get very good advantages from machine translation. And the challenge is that once you get them there, a small mistake can take them away from it. That also depends very heavily, as Marcel was pointing out in his presentation, you have various approaches, right? And he presented two. One is specific customer content. The other one is very fast flowing text to get the gist of it. In one, quality is not very important, but in the other, when the content you're translating is actually critical to business success of your customer, a small mistake can mean a lot. So we did have some stumbles there where we managed to get a customer on MT, and then after a simple mistake, they weren't keen anymore. So that's something to take into account. And the last one, again, as we handle everything in-house, although security is a critical concern, we were able, and as we're ISO 27001 certified, we're able to maintain data and control data in within through GDPR. Customer data is completely separated. It doesn't feed a central engine, and each customer has a separated engine, things like that. But when you're thinking about inputting machine translation into your process and you don't have it in-house, security considerations need to be taken into account, because this is customer data that is going to be flowing to a third party. There's also the fact of, and if we can move to the recommendations, Juan, and then we can add. Yeah, so our recommendation there goes towards, we believe generic MT is a solid starting point, but you need to take into account, I think at the beginning, there was a presentation saying, of course, you need to take into account budgets, size of your company, how are you integrating? And there are very good integration options like lingo systems that will help you out in creating the proper flows. But you need to also understand, I think Faiza was mentioning that garbage in, garbage out is a standing in the industry, right? How your customer creates the content is as important as the ability you have to send that content into generic MT or not. There's also technical challenges into creating the proper MT flow. Like, for example, if you have file-based translation or document-based localization, how are you managing inline tags? How are you managing the deconstruction of the file into a usable content? Is your cat tool ready for that? Is your cat tool ready for sending content directly to MT, or will you use a third-party integrator, which is a great solid option, but it will take you just as far as the technical side. They will also recommend very good options into how to manage that content. So all of those need to be taken into account when thinking about successfully integrating MT processes in within. And I think throughout all the presentations today, we've seen that generic MT, well, first, content is very important, the content of the customer, and generic MT will help you just as far as the content is involved. Once you get into something more complicated or content much more specific, you will need to think about customized engine. The good thing is a lot of the generic MT suppliers today also offer the ability to customize those engines. But as we said before, that goes through the needs of a special strategy behind it. What is your cat tool of choice? How are you integrating? What is your content? And that's very much part of that planning that needs to take place. As I said before, for us, all of that happens in-house. So it was, I wouldn't say easier, but it was kind of simpler to jump the potholes when they came in, rather than having to deal with externals and having to work with third parties and all the challenges that entails, right? So one key takeaway would be, it's not just about connecting that MT and being happy about it translating something for your customers. It's about having the ability to understand the strategy behind it. And then how do you as an LSP, how do your translators, and we're going to go into that in use cases, benefit from it, and then how your customers do. Anything you want to add, Juan, before we jump into the use cases?
No, just that you also want to be able to help your clients understand all this and, handhold them through the journey. And that's I think what we also have been doing. Otherwise, it's very hard to get them on board. Likewise for translators.
So we're gonna look at some of the case studies, and that's what we said that this is not just words. We've applied this successfully to various customers. We're just going to show you, or we're going to speak about two customers specifically today. One of them, major electronics distributor. So to give you context, they have worked with us for the last 10 years. We are the sole supplier for that customer. That means that we have a large corpus of data in translation memory from which we were able to build the initial machine or the initial engine we used for them. They translate into 22 languages. And as a simple example of how MT helped them, their initial question when we started deploying MT and the reasons behind deploying MT was, well, we're very good in the US, but we want to be very good outside of the US. And for that, we need to be faster. Or competitors are actually going to market faster than us with content that they create. So we need to trump that. So at the beginning, we had pure human translation with this customer, and we were translating, because there's a lot of content, we were translating in 4-week cycles. And that includes, of course, capital human, which means the capital is also taking account for translation memory matches and efficiency there, but it wasn't fast enough. So we actually trained engines on their data, and were able, through the training of engines, to not only remove, because we were using a workflow for them of 2 translators, and then feedback, spot check feedback from their, in this case, German is the language, from their reviewers. We were able to right away remove one of the translators, which means the process would be post-edited machine translation, 1 editor, and then the client feedback. Once we started doing that, at the beginning, the quality was, I would say, more or less there, because we already had a large translation base where to train the machine from. But once we started adding neural machine translation to the adaptive process that we had before, and with proper translator and customer feedback, we were able to even remove the second translation. So what happens now in that specific language is that the customer actually does raw machine translation, and then it just goes to their feedback for some of the content and comes out. That has made us increase the speed. And on the slide it says from 4 weeks to 1 week, because we're talking about 22 different languages, and not for all of them we have employed MT. But the reality is that it's 1 week because the customer wants it, because they don't publish as fast. So they publish in a week, and that's it. We could actually be as fast as 1 or 2 days, depending on the amount of data they're sending, with MT with proper post-processing. So that gives you a real life scenario where we've helped a customer with proper deployment of MT strategy to achieve their business goals. And this is something very, very important, because it gives validity to the works that MT is used as a productivity tool. This, of course, goes together with translators being part of dedicated teams, so they actually gain benefits from working and training that engine, and so on. So Juan, I don't want to take your thunder from the second use case, so you can take it for the other one.
Right, we still have time, I think. So this is a completely different use case. So this is a large publishing agency, and it's here because it was our first major neural project beginning 2019. Now, as opposed to the previous use case that Stevan was talking about, this was medical content, right? So it's highly specialized, terminology is critical, and you wouldn't expect high quality levels of MT in principle, right? So, but time scales were actually critical for this project. So it was training for doctors. So they had to be ready for the next year, right? So when doctors started the year. Now, and it was just to give some context, it was like 1 million words. It was super unstructured content, so we had to do a lot of fine engineering and data cleansing and a lot of things like that. But what we decided is that we did a first batch of content. We used that to train the engines, and then we started using it as productivity without actually, committing to faster turnarounds. We just said we are going to test how this works, right? The feedback from translators was well above expectations. The feedback from client reviewers, who were actual doctors, who did it after the shift, they were actually checking the content, was actually really good. And for us, this is what kickstarted the adoption levels that I was showing before. So this early 2019, and let me go back to those adoption levels. you can see there how the curve actually spikes up, right? So after this project and a couple of similar things, we started believing, everyone started believing that this was empty, could be used for pretty much any content type on the right circumstances. So not every content type, not every language combination, but it can increase productivity in most of them, I think. Yeah, lots of work. So it was like a very, very intense 3 months for us, but we a great output out of this one. So we wanted to highlight it. And I think we have time for questions now.